No, but anyway, we are delighted to have the three MLAs with us, Martin McGuinness, Deputy First Minister, Alban McGuinness and Stuart. So we'll start with you, Martin, and we each have 5 minutes, whichever you like. So if I can say 5 minutes, and that should give a little time for some discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Well, G. agus tá achas mórum a bheith seo live anew. Can I say, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be with you today. I was at the first meeting of the Constitutional Convention. Obviously, because of all our duties in the North, it's been very difficult to get to others, but I'm delighted to be at this one, which is specifically dealing with voting rights for people from the North in presidential elections. I do want to say I've followed the progress of this Constitutional Convention very closely indeed, and I have to say, in all of the decisions that you've made, you've covered yourself in glory. I think it's been fantastic and a breath of fresh air, badly needed. A couple of words struck me this morning whenever we listened to the diaspora, and it's absolutely can be applied to the situation in the North. And the words were connectedness and connectiveness, and I would add another one, the word belonging, which I think is hugely important. This year we had Fleadh Cheoil na hÉireann in Derry. First time it has ever come north of the border, and it was an amazing week. 430,000 people turned up. 50% higher than any other Fleadh Cheoil na hÉireann. And that was absolutely fantastic for the people of Derry. We had a bit of controversy in our city around Derry being allocated, and I argued for it, this title, UK City of Culture. I have no allegiance whatsoever to the UK, but I have every allegiance to being part of a programme which would bring a new energy to the city, a new dynamic to the city, and a very real prospect of new jobs for our young people. So I argued for it. But it was very, very important that the Fleadh came to the North. And it was very important whenever the Fleadh came to the North that we who were part of bringing the Fleadh to the North recognised that there was a community in Derry that wasn't pro-Irish, but was pro-British. And we wanted them passionately to be involved in the Fleadh. And we set out to work with people in that community, specifically with a group called the Londonderry Bands Forum. And through dialogue and discussion, lo and behold, 4 loyalist pipe bands agreed that they would participate in the Fleadh, which was absolutely fantastic. They were told not to play any controversial tunes. One of them couldn't resist it. And to a huge audience, they played the sash. And nobody blinked an eyelid. They got great applause. And it was absolutely fantastic. So when I argue for voting rights in presidential elections, I argue for voting rights not just for the community that I represent, the Nationalists and the Republicans. I am arguing for voting rights for those people. Also, they were born on the island of Ireland, and maybe not a huge percentage would turn out to cast their vote, but I think a sizable percentage would. I think it would be a fantastic act of reconciliation for the people of this island to stretch out the hand of friendship to those people. And I think if you were to consider this decision, and it is a big decision, and these are important decisions for the constitution of this country, consider it in that context that this propels what has widely seen internationally as the most successful peace process in the world forward in a very dynamic way. I think it would be difficult to overstate the historical significance of voting rights for Northern nationalists. Universal suffrage only came to the north as late as 1969. My father was a daily communicant, went to Mass every day of his life. I was shocked when I saw him in a civil rights protest march on the 5th of October 1969, arguing for one man, one vote. And of course, the people of Derry were beaten off the streets for demanding a fundamental right as the world watched in absolute disbelief. So the issue of the right to vote has a great resonance and a great meaning for all of us. Peter Canavan, one of the greatest Gaelic footballers that Ireland has ever seen, tells a great story about the 2003 All-Ireland final, whenever Tyrone played Armagh, and they lined up on the red carpet, 30 players, the cream of Gaelic footballers that year in our country. And President Michael Leese came down and walked along and shook each of their hands. And not one of those people on the red carpet had the right to vote on a presidential election, not even Mary McAleese. It's a very powerful story. So I think that's just one example of the continuing anomaly of partition and its daily reality of exclusion of your fellow citizens. Exclusion from our own nation is what denying us the franchise actually perpetuates. If we live outside the jurisdiction of the Irish state and under British jurisdiction, that is without our consent. And it is against our will. And I say that as someone who has signed up to the Good Friday Agreement and the principle of consent, and I don't believe in saying what I've just said, I'm in conflict with my loyalty to the agreements, whether it be the Good Friday Agreement, the St Andrews Agreement, or the Hillsborough Agreement, which myself and Gerry Adams were very at the heart of with other political leaders in bringing fundamental change to the North. So we in the North, and particularly border families, are often directly or indirectly affected by political decisions made in this state and by its policies, its laws, its spending decisions, its actions and indeed inactions. The reality of 21st century Ireland, I think, is one of absolutely of cross-border mobility. Many northern citizens have cross-border business interests or employment or own property and pay taxes on income and assets in the south. So I believe it's time to end these last vestiges of unequal citizenship.
Martin, I think we're getting close to the end
Okay,
of your
well,
time.
simply, I think I've made my case. The Good Friday Agreement fundamentally makes the case for all of us. This is about equality. It's about us in the North wanting to belong. When this is over, I'm going to rush to Croke Park to see the second half of the Clare-Cork match. I was there last Sunday watching the All-Ireland final. My brother was one of only two Gaelic footballers from Derry City who managed to play for Derry's senior county football team and won an All-Ireland medal and played in two All-Ireland semi-finals. So we feel very passionate about our Irishness, but we also feel very passionate about the peace process, about moving forward to peace and reconciliation and unity by totally peaceful and democratic means. This is a great opportunity to stretch out the hand of friendship to Northern nationalists, to Northern Republicans, and maybe even more importantly, to Northern Unionists. Gurmila Maugaf.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much. Now, could I invite Alban McGuinness of the SDLP to speak?
Chairman, members of the Constitutional Convention, I want to salute you for the work that you've done as a convention over the past number of months. I've been with you for most of the sessions, and I've enjoyed being here. But it's not a matter of enjoyment, it's a matter of getting inspiration from the work that you've been doing. And I do believe that the work that you've been doing is truly inspirational. And that work comes not just from the politicians amongst you, but in particular from the citizens. And that's what makes this gathering so dynamic, that you have this fusion between politicians and citizens. And I think it's created a tremendous synthesis of ideas. And we come to this issue in relation to votes outside the state. I think it's a no-brainer, Chairman. I think that Irish citizens living abroad should have a vote in the Irish presidential election. In fact, I would go further, and my party would go further, that they should have a vote for Dáil or indeed referenda. That, I believe, is something which is so irresistible in terms of the arguments that we've heard here today, in terms of the connectiveness that Irish immigrants abroad have with this country, in terms of the communications that there are between Irish citizens abroad and this country. But equally, the argument about connectiveness must equally apply to the north of Ireland and to citizens living in the north of Ireland. I am an Irish citizen. I happen to live in Belfast, not in Dublin, but I am an Irish citizen, and I believe I should have the right to vote in an Irish presidential election. At least, I would have ambitions to do further and to extend that franchise. But why is it important? It is because this country, this nation, has been divided. There is a brokenness in our body politic, and we have got to address that brokenness. And that's what we did in the Good Friday Agreement. And we have to build on the achievements of the Good Friday Agreement, and we have to, as it were, try to heal the brokenness through the institutions and through political development that arises out of the Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement, as Professor Colin Harvey has confirmed, provides people in Northern Ireland with the right to be Irish, or to be British, or to be both. And I believe that this state should recognise that, and the constitution of this state should recognise that, and in a practical, institutional sense, give people in the north of Ireland the right to vote. And why? Why is that important? It is important because it brings together north and south, because it helps to repair the brokenness of the body politic. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that has been broken up over the century. And we are now trying to mend it and bring it together. And this is one step on the way. And let's not exaggerate its importance. It is, as Professor Colin Harvey has said, a modest step, but an appropriate step. But I say to you that it is a dynamic step, because the message that will be gotten across, in particular to people in Northern Ireland, is that they are part. They are part of this nation, and they can participate, at least to some extent, in the politics of this state. And I think that that would be a very important political development. And out of that, I believe, will flow an awful lot. Now, some have said that the presidential election and granting a vote on that is a symbolic step, and that the presidency, in many ways, is symbolic. And I accept that. But I think that you have to look at the way the institution of the presidency has evolved since Mary Robinson, through Mary McAleese, and to the present President Michael D. Higgins. That office has been involved in the north of Ireland on a continuous basis over the past 2 decades, and it has impacted on Northern Ireland. It has helped in many ways to blur the divisions between North and South and to repair the fractured relationships between North and South. And therefore, although the office is symbolic, its influence, I believe, is inestimable. And I think it's very important that we recognise that. So I would say to you, Chairman, that although it may seem that this is a modest step, it is, I believe, a step that has great potential in transforming the relationships that have been so embittered and so soured and so divided for so long in Ireland. And we have a duty, and you have a duty, I believe, as citizens and politicians, to assist in the process of ending that brokenness and healing those divisions. And this would be one step towards that. And therefore, I would urge you to support it. I want to thank you for your friendship. I want to thank you for the debate and the argument and for the solidarity over the past number of months. I've enjoyed being here, and I will continue to attend as long as I can and make some contributions to your deliberations. Thank you very much indeed.
Alban, thank you very much. Actually, both Martin and Alban slightly slipped over their 5 minutes. So, Stuart, introducing Stuart Dixon of the Alliance Party, to say to you that you will have exactly the same latitude. Stuart.
Thank you. And thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the people that were sitting at my table earlier on today. We had a very interesting and very well-rounded conversation, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to have that debate. Representing the Alliance Party at this Constitutional Convention, we took a general view that we would only participate in those sessions which had a direct influence or impact on Northern Ireland, and today is one of those. And that is in part one of the reasons why I'm here. But I really do genuinely wish to thank you, and I've been here before and I have enjoyed the debate, and I think the methodology and the way in which the whole process is being done is really not only a credit to yourselves, but it really is a model for many European countries and a very modern way of doing politics. So congratulations in relation to that. I'm both British and Irish. I hold an Irish passport, but I'm also a British citizen. I'm, as a professor from Queen's University said, Northern Irish. But I also see myself as a European. In fact, I have an old election slogan at home that says, "My country, Europe." So I'm a very complex individual. I think we probably all are. We all see ourselves on a range of different levels. Comment has been made, and the debate at this stage is about whether the franchise with regards to presidential elections should be particularly extended to citizens in Northern Ireland, although it is a part of a much wider debate in relation to Irish citizens wherever they live. The Good Friday Agreement did not create joint authority. It recognised Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom, but it also recognised the possibility of constitutional change for Northern Ireland and indeed the United Kingdom, and the position of Northern Ireland within that, through the principle of consent, which would include and require referendum both north and south. Therefore, we have what is in effect a very delicate balance in the constitutional position of Northern Ireland. To make a unilateral shift in that, which I believe, extending the franchise for a presidential election to people in Northern Ireland, could have the potential effect of upsetting what is in a really delicate balance. We could have a situation where citizens in Northern Ireland would see the President of Ireland as their head of state, perhaps just Catholics and nationalists. And we would have Unionists and Protestants seeing the Queen as their head of state. That would be a very difficult, and I would predict a very dangerous situation for us to get into. As a Liberal and as a member of the Alliance Party, I actually believe where I live and where I contribute is where I belong and where I should vote. Listening to the gentleman speaking from Germany today, while I understand his want to vote in Irish elections, if I were in his shoes, what I really would want to be fighting for is my right to vote in German elections. That's what I would be doing no matter where I lived in the world. If I left this country, if I left some other part of the United Kingdom or some other European state and went to live somewhere else and wished to live and contribute in that community and that society, and they denied me the right to vote on the basis of some form of disqualification, my challenge wouldn't be to want to vote back in my home country, but it would be to want to vote in the country in which I was living and contributing in. But I don't rule out the prospect of that change. But I think that change has to be very carefully thought through. And for us in Northern Ireland, it is part of a very delicate balance created by the Good Friday Agreement. Today's discussion is perhaps one of those discussions, while I understand we should be looking at the high-level concept of voting rights and extending those voting rights, that in fact we're perhaps having a cart before the horse conversation. And in fact that the devil is in the detail. And until we actually know what the detail is, we shouldn't actually be making a decision in respect of this matter. We've heard some statistics, both in respect of Northern Ireland and also internationally. Those statistics would have the propensity to skew an election quite perhaps substantially and indeed unintentionally. We heard about a backlash. Perhaps the backlash would be that citizens living in the Republic of Ireland would be very annoyed about citizens living outside the Republic of Ireland changing the outcome of an election which they believed was in their best interests. Some of that may be dealt with, for example, by an electoral college type system, so that citizens living outside the Republic of Ireland, and this could include Northern Ireland, their votes would be counted in some form of electoral college process rather than actually having a direct numerical influence on that election. I'd like to take this opportunity finally to, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, to say that today I am not in favour of extending the franchise to Northern Ireland for the reasons which I have said, particularly from my perspective to protect the delicate balance of the Good Friday Agreement. But if the citizens, both North and South, and the governments and the Assembly in Northern Ireland determine that we should have that conversation, then I think that that is a conversation which is well worth having, and I do not rule it out in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stuart, for that. Martin, are you rushing away to the match? Well, just for the moment. Well, let's just. We've got a few minutes, not many, but because I think in a way probably we all need a cup of coffee shortly. But if there were a couple of comments, you know, we've had the advocates on both sides of this argument. We've had this really important discussion about Northern Ireland, and if there were a couple of comments, I'd be happy to take them. Regina, where's Regina? Oh, Regina, and then Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you. Regina Doherty is my name. I'm 99% sure in my head where I am with Irish citizens, but I'm really curious and have some questions with regard to the North, and particularly in relation to how you think it would be received if, for argument's sake, if we decided today that the entire community of Northern Ireland should have a vote. How would that be received by the people in the North who don't consider themselves Irish, who do consider themselves British? And genuinely, Stuart, how do you feel it would impact on the Good Friday Agreement? And could it be detrimental insofar as that it would be seen as an advance by the Republic of Ireland to impose a president for the entire island of Ireland as opposed to the Republic of Ireland? There's there's a whole lot of questions I have buzzing around in my head from that.
That certainly, that in essence was what I was trying to say, and I think that is genuine.
Could you get closer to the microphone,
Sorry,
Stuart?
that is genuinely what I believe. The Good Friday Agreement, I think, is certainly perceived by many people, and probably primarily by Protestants, as a settlement, and that settlement is going to have to last for a very long time, and any change in that could very much be seen as a change in the process, as a Trojan horse that was actually introduced by the Good Friday Agreement, and that there would be a case of, well, we told you so. And I don't actually think that's what the Good Friday, in fact, I'm absolutely convinced that's not what the Good Friday Agreement was all about at all. The Good Friday Agreement was about bringing proper relationships between the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland, and the contested state of Northern Ireland. And it has brought a settlement to a question that needed to be settled. And in those circumstances, I think that this is a very difficult change, and it's one that has the propensity to cause a great deal of damage if it were to proceed.
Thank you. Alban, did you indicate you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I don't see how it can damage the Good Friday Agreement. I don't think it'll damage our politics. I see it as a dynamic element in developing good relations between North and South. It will actually allow people in the North to be involved at some level in politics throughout the whole island of Ireland. I think that's an important step forward. Now, we've had various discussions about results being skewed. I resent that word. If Northern citizens vote in an Irish election, their vote's the same as any other vote in Cork or anywhere else or in Dublin. The result might be different from what some people might want, but Northern citizens are exercising their vote, and I think that's a very important thing, to involve people in the political life of the country, perhaps at a peripheral level, but nonetheless an important symbolic level, and I think that is a good thing. The other thing is, I believe unionists will vote. I believe unionists will vote. They might vote against people, but they might even put their own candidate up. Yeah. But is that not of great value? Getting unionists involved at a national level in Irish politics, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
And I mean, the Good Friday Agreement allows you to be Irish, to be British, or to be British and Irish at the same time. So, you know, that's scarcely damaging that aspect of things.
Thanks, Alban. Martin?
Well, I'm not that sure that the unionists would put up a candidate, but I absolutely agree with Alban that unionists would vote. And over time, I think more and more unionists will vote, even if they're casting their ballot to prevent, say, a Sinn Féin candidate becoming president, which is quite legitimate in a democratic society. I don't think it impinges at all on the Good Friday Agreement. And President Higgin himself, and I'm going to quote him, his wish was to be the president for all the Irish at home and abroad. And he committed himself to building a real and inclusive republic. Now, that's what I want to see. I want to see a situation where those people who, under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, were accorded the right to continue to be part of the Irish nation, to have the added ability, not just to get a passport, but to actually cast a vote for the president of this country. Would that cause civil disturbance? Not in a million years. Some people mightn't like it. Some people might issue statements criticising it. But it would not, under any circumstances, move the inexorable course to peace off the agenda in one iota. Absolutely confident about that.
Okay. We'll come. Stuart, I know you want to come in. What I want to take, you will get back in again. Ryan, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very good point that's been made, and I want to give a non-party political view on this. Someone from the national / Republican community that's not involved in party politics. I, at the moment, don't have a right. I don't have the right to vote for president. I'm an Irish citizen, I have an Irish passport. Here it is here. That's it. I am not Northern Irish, I am not British. I completely respect those who are British. I completely respect those that hold a Northern Irish identity. But I am an Irish citizen. That's the bottom line. And I'm asking for the right to vote for president. The other thing I would say is that in terms of the unionist community, I'll make it clear again. I have spent my entire adult life working with loyalist paramilitaries, working with unionist politicians, working with unionist community leaders. I would never be involved in anything that would be divisive in terms of where we're at. The compromise that was reached in the Good Friday Agreement was very simple and very, very clear. That we've accepted the principle of consent, as in we, the Nationalist Republican community, we've accepted that. But our Irish identity and our Irish nationhood was given to us in statute as part of that agreement. So by me getting a right to vote for the head of my nation should in no way impinge or take away from anyone's right to be British. We've seen the work that President McAleese undertook. We've seen the work that Martin has undertaken in terms of reaching out to the British monarchy, welcoming the British head of state here to this jurisdiction, and also reaching out in the north. That's what this is about. This is about bridge building. It's about equality, and it's about promoting the ideal of peace.
Colin, I'll let you in as well, but I do want to take two comments from the floor, then we'll go back for one last round of comments. Catherine Murphy firstly, and then Jerry Adams.
Thank you. It goes back to the first panel actually, and it goes back to one of the points that was raised this morning about, what does it mean to be an Irish citizen? And obviously there's rights and responsibilities. And where most of the people, including some of my own family, have emigrated from this country, there's others who have gone for less than benign reasons. And the responsibility aspect of it, for example, for people who have gone and, declared their centre of interest outside of Ireland, all of the economic arguments don't fall on one side, is the point that I'm trying to make. And I think it's important to put that back into the equation, that responsibility for people who are, maybe they have economic interest, and they're moving those economic interests outside for negative reasons to this state. And if you look at the situation in the US, for example, there is a responsibility on a citizen of the US that has tax obligations if they move outside. So there can be other things in terms of the economic side, and I think it's a point worth making.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Jerry, please.
I didn't intend really to speak, but Stuart provoked me. So, you see, this is just a very natural extension of the Good Friday Agreement. Good Friday Agreement isn't a settlement. It's the Belfast Agreement. It's an agreement. It's an accord. But at its core, it's about equality. It's parity of esteem. It's tolerance. It's respect for all of the people who live in that part of the island and across the island. And just two little, because Ryan made reference to Martin's handshake with Queen Elizabeth. What most people may have missed was the President was there that day as well. And quite rightly. And that was the balance that was part of that choreographed event. Also, Mary Robinson at her time visited loyalist and unionist neighbourhoods and communities and was welcomed. So did Mary McAleese, and so does Michael D. Some politicians from here are actually more welcome in parts of the north than there may be in parts of this state. Michael Noonan was at Stormont on Friday discussing matters of mutual importance and advantage to both people in both parts of the island. So the need just to embrace the rights of citizens there to exercise the vote. And I agree with Alban, which is a not enough occurrence. Unionists, not all unionists, of course, but unionists will vote. Well, sure. Unionists will vote tactically. Yeah. And that's a very, very good thing, and it's a very, very simple thing. So others have described it better than me. I was very taken by Colin's passion when he was speaking, and when he said, I'm an academic, but this isn't an academic subject for me. And that's given you an insight into what I presume was a very moderate Derry person welcome into the city of Belfast, just given a sense of how emotional this is. Just imagine if the people of Munster were told, you can't elect the president. Or the people of Dublin were told, or the people of Carlow were told, or the people with red hair were told, you have no vote in this. So let's treat everybody the way we want to be treated ourselves. Go on, Margaret.
Thanks, Jerry. We're running a little bit over time, but I do want to let all of the panellists here have one last word. But Charlie, you want to also have a small intervention as well.
I just want to say, in the context of our morning's deliberations and indeed this afternoon's deliberations, I think it would be both unfair and unreasonable if a message was to go from this convention that extending the vote to Irish citizens overseas and Irish citizens on this island was to be in some way construed as a Trojan horse for exercising the jurisdiction of this state over Northern Ireland. I don't believe that is what we're about. I don't believe it's a message that should go from here. I prefer to look at it in the context of a continuation of the Good Friday Agreement. And if people are fearful that this is in some way to be construed as a power grab, well, then I suggest they read the Constitution, and particularly the amended Articles 2 and 3 of our Constitution, consequent on the Good Friday Agreement, and Article 6 of our Constitution, which specifically states the jurisdiction of the officers of our state, including the President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I'm going to start, and I would ask people to be very brief. Colin, I knew you wanted to get in again and briefly to comment on something. If you don't, that's fine.
Just very briefly to say two things. One is, I think it's important that we focus on the specific question that we're being asked today. I think that's one point around the right to vote in presidential elections from those residents outside the state. But I'd also like to just pick up on one point. That it's often said in the debates about Northern Ireland that Northern Ireland remains constitutionally part of the UK in law. And that is, of course, legally correct. But the terms of governing Northern Ireland since 1998 have changed. The terms of governing have changed in law and practice. And the principles that now govern the terms of that change are set out in the agreements, the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, and also the agreements that follow. And what you're being asked to do this weekend, I would just like to say, is fully consistent and in line with those agreements. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. John, do you want to comment?
Very briefly, I think it's interesting the comments that are made about the probability that Unionist stroke, Protestant stroke, British people would actually engage and vote if they were given the right to do so, and they would vote tactically, vote strategically, and probably because certain basically the non-Sinn Féin parties would try to mobilise the Protestant vote in Northern Ireland. And one of the things that I was intrigued by in the data I had was that the non-Sinn Féin parties would be starting from quite a low base in terms of trying to mobilise, because Protestant antipathy to Sinn Féin was pretty much the same as their antipathy to the non-Sinn Féin parties who may try to mobilise them, i.e. they didn't like Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael very much, and I presume it would be Fine Gael who would try to mobilise the Protestant vote against a Sinn Féin candidate.
Ryan, did you want the last word? No.
Yeah, just in terms of presidential elections, I want everyone to think very carefully of the last 4 presidential elections that we've had in the state. And I want you to think very carefully about whether they followed party lines or whether they followed the usual elections we had to the Oireachtas. Because they were about personalities, they were about individuals, and it was a completely different type of election. It was about a person being elected to guard the Constitution and lead the nation. And if you think about it very carefully and look at them elections, in every one of them, there were surprises along the way. They are not the same as the usual traditional elections, and they don't follow traditional party lines. So what we are asking here simply is for us to have a fresh approach in terms of how we look at the head of the nation. And I want you to think also very carefully tomorrow when you cast your ballot in terms of this vote, how the last couple of presidential elections panned out. They're a different situation. It's a different context in terms of politics in this island. We have an opportunity now to make significant change. You have that power. You are the people that have been put into this august body to set the tone for the next century in this island. And I ask you to consider very, very carefully the opportunity in front of you today to unite the people of Ireland across the world. Thank you.
Thank you. On this side, brief. Stuart, you're going to have the last word, so maybe that's the most powerful one. Martin.
Colin referred to the Good Friday Agreement, and just to remind people, whenever that agreement was agreed, It set up three important institutions: Power Sharing Executive in the North, North-South Ministerial Council, and the British Irish Council, North-South, East-West internal relationships. I'm the longest serving Deputy First Minister. I'm the longest serving member of the North-South Ministerial Council, and I'm the longest serving member of the British Irish Council. And I say that to highlight for people the fact that those institutions have clearly found favour with the overwhelming majority of the people of this island: nationalist, loyalist, Republican and Unionist. Now, I remember the very first time Ian Paisley and I led our ministers to meet with the Taoiseach and his ministers. And there were over 20 of us in a building in Armagh City. And we all stood for a family photograph. And what was striking about the family photograph of ministers from Belfast and from Dublin was that there wasn't a British minister in sight. And that's how we need to go forward. Changing the Constitution to give people in the North the right to vote for the President is a natural part of that evolutionary process. And I think that the way in which this happens, if it does happen, has to be couched clearly in terms of ensuring that everybody in the North recognises that this is a very serious attempt by people in the south of our country to stretch out the hand of friendship and reconciliation to Catholics and Protestants, Loyalists, Unionists, Nationalists and Republicans. It would be a very powerful development.
Thanks, Martin. Alban?
Just to say about the Good Friday Agreement, Good Friday Agreement is a dynamic political arrangement. It's not an arrangement that leads to some sort of political paralysis. And we should remember that. We have to work through the agreement in order to achieve the goal of the agreement. What is the goal of the agreement? The goal is reconciliation in this island. It's to repair the brokenness of this island and the brokenness of our people, to repair those damaged relationships, both within Northern Ireland, between North and South, and between Britain and Ireland. Now, we've done pretty well in relation to Britain and Ireland. And we've made some progress between North and South, and we have to do better within Northern Ireland itself. But remember the dynamic nature of the Good Friday Agreement. And this small, modest proposal could help to make that work much better. And I think that you should be seeing it within that context. And I just want to repeat again that the presidents, the series of presidents that we've had, have made a contribution to Northern Ireland and have been accepted throughout Northern Ireland in all communities for the past 2 decades or thereabouts. That's an amazing achievement. And therefore, it is right and proper and fitting that people in Northern Ireland maybe should have some say in the election of that person who can make that sort of contribution.
So, Stuart, thank you very much, Alban. And Stuart, you have the last word.
I don't make any apology for being a different voice here today, and I genuinely do not come from this from a unionist perspective. Heaven forbid I am not a unionist, nor am I a nationalist or Republican either. I come from it primarily from a non-territorial liberal perspective of genuinely where I live and where I contribute is where I want to be able to vote. I don't rule out in the future the dynamics that have been talked about, and I am wholly supportive of and campaigned for the Good Friday Agreement, in that change can be worked for and brought about in Northern Ireland. But I would caution you, as Ryan said, the Good Friday Agreement was a compromise. So too was designated days for the Union flag on Belfast City Hall, the consequence of which was an arson attack and the burning out of my office. I know how difficult compromise is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I know some people would like to come in. I'm afraid we've just run out of time. The reason I allowed this conversation to go on 20 minutes longer was because of, I think, of the seriousness of it, of the importance of it. And I think we've been very well served by all of the people up here on the panel, and I want to thank them all very much indeed. If we could restrict our coffee to about 10 minutes and get back as close to 4 o'clock as possible. Thank you.